If people took one thing away from the book, just one, what would you say it should be?
I would say lean on other people. Get some people, get a community, have people to turn to, especially people who've already been through caregiving or are in the process. They will understand it like nobody else.
Barry, what's the one thing you would say?
I mean, just to underscore some of what Julie said, I mean, knowledge is power, and we really have been trying to empower people so that they can go into this not with a deer in the headlights kind of a look or a feeling of dread, but that they feel like this is doable. I mean, there's a learning curve. People get better at it, and they can do this.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners. Today we're going to talk about caregiving, and I got two experts coming in. They're the authors of a new book called the AARP Caregiver Answer Book. And they talk about, like, what does it take to be a caregiver, and how do you set boundaries around it? How do you protect yourself? And how do you, like, make it through caregiving, which sounds simple, but it's really hard. So we have Dr. Jacobs and Dr. Mayer and their husband and wife team who put this book together. So we're going to get to talk to both of them and pick their brains. So why don't you introduce yourself? Julie, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Julia Mayer. I'm a clinical psychologist in practice for over 30 years, increasingly specializing in caregivers because there's so many of them. And Barry and I have written, this is our third book together, so it's been a really great collaboration, and I'm looking forward to our talk today.
I'm not sure I could write a book with my wife. I'd probably one of us would kill each other. I'm not sure which, but I guess it works for you two. And Barry?
So like Julia, I'm a clinical psychologist and have been working in the caregiving space for, going on close to 40 years, which says I'm an old guy. I also, the last 7 years or so, have been a healthcare consultant for a national healthcare consulting firm. So working on the business side of it as well. Really happy to be here, Jay. And by the way, we are in the Philadelphia area, just FYI.
Great. Barry originally reached out to me and he was kind of like, what do you guys do for caregiving and how do you do this? And he was kind of explaining, some of like the crises he gets pulled into and how that works. And I said, I don't have a lot of those because we try to plan ahead. We call this in the no baby steps, the plan for parents. And how do you set a plan around caregiving? But it's interesting because it sounds like, at least Barry, from our initial conversation, a lot of folks kind of caregiving is just thrown on them. Is that fair?
I think that's certainly more than fair. In the case of our own families, I mean, particularly my mother, this came up very suddenly. So just to tell a short story here, my mother was caring for her husband, my stepfather, who had significant and advanced Alzheimer's dementia. And she did not want Julia or I involved in their lives at all. It was very important for her to feel like she was on top of this until the day that she called me and said, hey, can you send me $30,000? And because basically she had run out of money. She had taken a second mortgage on her home without telling me or telling anybody for that matter. And at an age where she had no business doing that, could never have repaid it. And, we had to all of a sudden kind of swoop in and hire an attorney for her, have her declare bankruptcy and move her out of that home to an apartment very close to us. So that was an example of how bad things could be when you don't plan. My mother resisted planning because she didn't want her children taking over her life.
Yeah, I don't know how many times people are like, oh, well, you don't have to worry about it. It's not your problem. And I'm like, no, it's going to be my problem at some point. I'm telling you, and people are like, I just don't want to talk about it. Or like, if we talk about it, it's going to happen and all this garbage. And I'm like, no. The answer is we need to plan ahead for this. Because the bottom line is at some point your parents are going to be disabled or die. It just kind of, that's life. And your parents' planning or lack thereof can have more of an impact on your finances than your own decision. I mean, your example is $30,000, which is a lot of money. But I mean, that's just the start of the cost.
There was a lot of things that $30,000 was just the tip of the iceberg. And we had no idea. And I in part blame myself for not having pushed a little harder and sat down with them and say, hey, you're getting older. We need to work on this together. instead, I kind of deferred to their judgment. And frankly, I mean, I was in a little bit of denial that they were getting older and had as many difficulties as they were having.
And I don't know about you, but my mom like hides stuff from me. Like, oh, I didn't want to bother you, but I've been having chest pain for the last week. And I'm like, Mom, like, how many times does she call me? And I'm like, now she gets to call me. And I'm like, she calls me out of the blue for something. I'm like, call your doctor. She's like, I knew you were going to say that. I'm like, no, if you're calling me because you now are admitting you have this problem, you've probably had it too long and you need some help. I mean, is that just me and my mom?
No, not at all. I think a lot of people, first of all, don't want to acknowledge that they're getting older, that they have increasing medical needs. They definitely don't want their kids to know about it. They don't want intrusion from their kids. They don't want to be reminded or nagged. And I think maybe there's some pride or shame or who knows, that kind of thing where, they don't want to acknowledge it to themselves. So it's hard for them to acknowledge it to their family members.
Yeah, I think that last point that you made, Julie, is an excellent one. And that if you are concerned enough that you're reaching out to somebody to say, hey, what do I do about this? I think this is a problem. You're essentially saying, I have a problem. But if you don't reach out and you just make believe it's not a problem, then you can remain in denial for longer. So reaching out for help, it's tantamount to accepting that you have a problem.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of my clients are like, well, how do I start this conversation? And what I tell them is blame me. Dr. J says I have to have this conversation. And sometimes I'll actually meet with them with their parents and be the one to ask the hard questions. Because they're like, I can't ask that of my mom. I'm like, you can, but I will do it for you. But how do you two kind of encourage people to start the conversation? Because that to me is the hardest step.
It is. And it can take a few years to really get the conversation going, actually. So we ask people to start pretty early. And the way that you bring it up is you say, I want to, first of all, help you make the aging process as comfortable and positive as possible and worry-free. But I also want to help me with your aging process and making it as comfortable and worry-free. A lot of times parents push their adult children away and say, I got this. I don't need you. I don't need you. But if you keep trying and you keep making it clear that this is not about controlling them, it's about sort of being a safety net, hopefully eventually they get the idea.
Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, this is the Childfree podcast, Childfree Wealth podcast. So the folks who are listening probably don't have children by choice, but they may have other family members who have an interest in their well-being as they age. And so that the issue becomes, how do those folks raise the topic in a way that is not sudden, is not, not in response to an emergency, but it's just kind of normal. Like, hey, you going for your physical this week. It'd be a great time maybe for you and I to kind of talk about where you are with your medical problems, what meds you're taking. And so that I can be in a position to help you if something should happen. Maybe I could even have some rapport with your physician if you agree to that. Or, when people have a birthday or anniversary, there's lots of opportunities. What we tell people not to do is not wait till Thanksgiving dinner and say, hey, pass the mashed potatoes. And by the way, have you done your advance directive yet? Right? Have you done financial planning? So it has to be at a time, generally one-on-one. And as Julie pointed out, it's not something that people will often say, oh yeah, let's sit down and talk about this. They'll say, no. You don't worry about me. You worry about yourself. And you have to come back to it multiple times. And even if the conversation gets started during the first or second attempt, you're not going to complete that conversation. Then it's going to take lots of conversations over lots of time. And then before you actually get somebody into the financial planner's office, maybe 6 months or more.
I'm just laughing because my co-host Bree sent her parents a knockbox, which is the one that collects all the documents for Thanksgiving. Said, fill this out, which sometimes you can be direct, but it doesn't always work. When I talk to clients, I want to have a conversation with them first about their boundaries. And the conversation I'm really having is like, what are you willing to do versus not? Like, for example, my wife and I have decided nobody lives with us. It's just not going to work. We just know ourselves, just not going to be. We'll care in other ways. But how do you set boundaries? Because I had somebody the other day, really interesting question. He goes, look, culturally, it's expected that I do this. And I'm like, that's fair, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. Because we often get for child-free folks, well, you don't have kids, so you can take care of mom. And I'm like, I've also got a life. How do you start that boundary conversation? And how do you set ones that protect yourself?
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bree. I highly encourage you to schedule a Childfree Wealth checkup. During this time, you're going to get a couple of forms to fill out that include your life and financial plan. We'll review them, and then we're going to have a meeting and go through them with you. We're going to give you some advice and things to work on and talk through things to make your finances simpler so your life can be amazing. You can schedule yours by going to our website, childfreewealth.com, and clicking the Schedule Now button.
Excellent question. And that is exactly what happens all the time. The adult child without kids, they're the ones everyone else expects to take care of the parents. It is totally unfair and insulting, and it assumes that you don't have a life, which is absolutely not true. So first you clarify that. Basically, if you can have a meeting with your siblings and the parents, that would be excellent, because then everyone can talk about what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do versus what they're capable of doing. And even the parent can weigh in and say, well, I would like to live near this adult child, but I need that one to visit me sometimes, or that one pays my bills, but they live across the country, so this one mows my lawn. The best thing is communication, and to make your needs clear proudly without feeling like you're supposed to do something, because that never works well in the long run.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, there are definitely cultures where there's the expectation where this elder care is paramount. That's paying the highest respect to elders. Those elders took care of the folks that were one or two generations above them, and so to not agree to do elder care is hard. It's very hard. It really increases the guilt that people feel about making an individual choice. I think your point, Jay, is that people have individual choice in American culture in particular, and that's true. But it has to be weighed against all these cultural imperatives that they've been raised with, and then they have to really kind of decide that if they're not going to do the care themselves, how are they going to ensure that the care occurs adequately anyway? So what other arrangements are they going to help make? But that's still a matter of planning. Like if you're not going to move in with me, or I'm not going to move in with you, then how do we ensure that you can live as well as you want in your own home or in a home in the community? And what arrangements need to be made, and how are we going to pay for that?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, the challenge with child-free folks is they're kind of already going against the cultural norms anyway, because we've decided not to have kids. We're not continuing on the lineage or whatever else it is. And I was having a conversation. This was actually part of the child-free convention. They had a great conversation about multi-generational homes, and they were talking about India and Pakistan. And they're like, when you decide you're not having kids, you get kicked out of the multi-generational home because you're not matched the pattern. And we, as child-free folks, we get the question all the time, well, who's going to take care of you when you're older? And I'm like, my money is my plan with some help. But they're like, well, that's what your kids do. And I'm like, did you have kids to have help? I mean, like, there's so much in here that I'm not sure how you unpack that.
And oftentimes children do not take care of their parents. They can be not talking to each other. They can have all sorts of other issues that get in the way of taking care of their aging parents. So you can't count on that for sure.
In our book, the AARP Caregiver Answer Book, we really we have a chapter called The High Cost of Caregiving, which is all about, all right, so how do we pay for the care that people need? And the care out of pocket is expensive. And I think your point is well taken, Jay, that for folks that are not going to rely on their kids or whatever the cultural expectation is, that the younger generations are going to step in and care for them, then they have to plan much more assiduously and maybe further in advance to ensure that they have the resources to have choices about who's caring for them and what kind of care they're going to receive.
And by the way, that's why we try for our child-free folks to have a plan in place by the time they're mid-40s. I mean, we're doing this early. We've got a new product coming out called Childfree Legacy that we're actually going to serve as the medical power of attorney, all that. But one of the other ones I run into in this kind of plan for parents is, well, mom and dad did not do well on their finances. They don't have the extra money to pay for it. And now you've got to do some debates on paying for care since you brought that up. And maybe we just, we're looking at what are the options, and Medicaid care, at least in my mind, I've not seen great Medicaid care. I guess it exists out there, but the odds that you're going to get in a high class facility that's great care, that's taking Medicaid is very low. And is it okay to be like, hey, mom and dad, we're going to make sure you're safe here, but we're not going to pay the extra for long-term care? And I asked this because I had a client who said, well, we're going to pay for our parents' long-term care. And they have 3 parents between them. And it was going to be like $750,000. And I'm like, you can't afford that. Like, how do you find that balance? Because they were going to have to like rob their retirement to pay for their parents' long-term care.
I don't know how you balance that. I mean, but what I would say is, I mean, I think Medicaid beds within a skilled nursing facility are going to become more rare given the likely changes coming down the pike to Medicaid, and that the facilities that take Medicaid money to pay really vary in quality to an enormous degree. My stepfather went into a nursing home under Medicaid, and the place I felt was like a snake pit. It was horrendous. My mother went into one that was also under Medicaid, but she went into a facility that had a religious affiliation. The facility didn't just depend on Medicaid proceeds. It had a lot of charity helping support the folks there, and so it was much higher quality. But certainly, it's far better in this day and age to not rely on Medicaid if you can help it. And all the studies suggest that 70 to 80% of folks prefer to stay in the community, or particularly in their own homes if possible. And there are lots of ways of doing that. I mean, there's more and more technology to enable that, whether it be remote monitoring, whether it be putting in environmental modifications to make the home safer. But I think that's really where the growth area is going to be, having people served in the community, perhaps in their home, or if not in their home, then in smaller residences with several other people, and that will just be far less expensive than today's nursing homes.
I'd love them to be far less expensive, but I don't know. Like, it seems like everything's getting more expensive. So in your book, you talk about caring for people with cognitive impairment. And I don't think people understand just how hard that can be. And sometimes when you're like, hey, I'd like to keep dad at home, I'd like to take care of him, sometimes the better care for him is actually not with you because, safety and other things. Like, talk to me about what that's like.
Well, that is what happened with Barry's stepfather. Because he had Alzheimer's, we had them in an apartment. It lasted almost a year, but he would wake up in the middle of the night. He would take the plates off the electric outlets because he used to be handy. He removed the faucet. He was making a mess, and he was getting himself in danger, as well as my mother-in-law, and she could not handle him. He would get all angry, and just dementia is the hardest kind of caregiving. So we all agreed that we needed to move him someplace where he would be safe, where he would not cause damage, where, he could get the care that he needed. And it was very sad. And I think my mother-in-law, had a very hard time. She visited him frequently. But it was the best. It was the right thing to do for him because he was not safe in that home.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the most loving thing that my mother could do for him at the time, even though it was a very hard decision and he didn't want to go. I mean, he didn't quite understand at first what this was about. He thought he was going to a hospital, but after a while, I kind of got the hang of it, that he wasn't leaving. And he would sort of try to sneak out with my mother when she would come visit, and then, head out. And so it was quite sad. But I think, ultimately when people make a decision like that, especially for someone with cognitive impairment and can't make a decision on their own, it's not because they're discarding the person, which is, the most harsh way of looking at this, but really because they want to ensure their safety, perhaps ensure their dignity, and provide 24/7 care when the person may in fact need that. If they're having bed sores and they need someone to turn them every few hours, there's no caregiver who's going to do that at home. And it's just not possible without kind of giving up your life and destroying your health. It's really ultimately the most loving thing that a family member can do for someone who really needs that type of care.
Yeah, I had somebody explain it to me as aging in the right place rather than aging in place. I like the framing of that, because there's a right place for some folks and I think you also talked about kind of what happens when you overdo it. And I think people kind of undercount what's called caregiver fatigue. Like there's a point where you just can't give anymore. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, we call it burnout. And it happens often because caregivers take on too much for too long. They don't have enough of a support system. They don't have enough community to kind of turn to or lean on. And there they are, isolated, especially with someone with dementia. There's no rest. They don't sleep at night. There's just no time off. And it often affects their health. There is a certain percentage of caregivers who get sicker, and die before the care receiver because they're not taking care of their own health. So we really stress that how important that is, and that you can put someone in respite. There are ways to get a break, and you need to take them.
And people often resist self-care. They resist it even though it makes perfect sense that if you're someone who used to go to the gym to blow off steam, and now you're a caregiver and you stop going to the gym because somehow you feel like the time you spent at the gym is time taken away from the person who really needs that care during that time. And so it's like it becomes a zero-sum game. Like what I do for me, I take away from you. That's not true. I mean, what you do for you actually gives you more energy, replenishes you, puts you in a better state of mind to provide care, and actually, increases the quality of the care that's provided. But unfortunately, people get into this mindset of, I just got to tough this out. I got to keep pushing. I got to keep pushing. I got to demonstrate that I'm a good family member to do this. And then, as you brought up earlier, if there are cultural expectations or other societal expectations that people feel, then they feel all the more like they have to just keep on with this, keep their nose to the grindstone, and they don't allow themselves to feel some of that fatigue that you're saying. And sometimes, one of the ways to not feel things is just focus entirely on the tasks that you have to do. Like you get a list of things to do every day. You spend the day racing through the day to try to cross off as many things as you can and not feel anything, not feel exhausted, not feel sadness. Unfortunately, if you don't feel anything, it's like having pain. If you don't let yourself feel pain, you may do more damage to yourself. That pain is a signal. Fatigue is also a signal, and so we have to pay attention to that. But again, people don't want to do that if they can help it, because they just don't want to deal with the guilt of maybe stepping back even a little bit.
Yeah, and by the way, this guilt is heavy. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. Like anyone that's cared for family members know that it's real. So you guys have been in this field for quite a while. You've written a bunch of books, and I don't know, I'm going to give you a magic wand. And we know that a whole bunch of folks are going to be, aging, and they need more and more care. And the system is kind of broken. I'm just going to call that out. If you guys had the magic wand, what would you say the biggest thing we need to do as a society to help with this caregiver crisis?
You're absolutely right. The long-term care system in this country is broken. It's underfunded. It fares poorly against and when compared to other countries' systems, and we just don't put the money into the infrastructure that we have to. So if I could wave the magic wand, we would realign our priorities so that we are creating a system of home and community supports to enable people to stay in their homes, that we're designing homes to better suit people as they get older, and so they're not walking up, trying to climb 3 flights of stairs to get to the bedroom, and that as a society we also value caring for family members to a greater degree. I think we do sort of, but also times people feel kind of ashamed that they've like stopped working because they're not going to care for somebody, or their friends say, "Oh, you're a saint to do this, but we're going to go to lunch without you, right? We're not going to invite you." It's not. I mean, more and more people are experiencing this, and then once they experience it, they kind of get it, that this is really hard, and you really deserve the admiration of others, but also support of others. But we're not quite there yet. Society doesn't value this yet.
I would say that the issue seems to rise to the surface a lot is isolation. That when people are caregivers, like Barry's saying, their friends go out without them. They can't get away. More and more people start to leave them behind. They don't want to hear about what they're dealing with, and they feel very isolated. So in an ideal place, we would have community. We would have community that's built in so that as somebody has a need, people help them. It doesn't just have to be their family. It would be a system that helps them stay in their home if that's what they want to do. And that somehow we could perpetuate that through generations so that it's not about relying on one person to do all the care. It's a community.
And by the way, that community is so important. And I'm not going to ask the question, but the question is always, and what's going to make it change? And I don't know. There's mornings I wake up and I'm like, I don't know. Like we're doing so much work for the Childfree folks on this, and we're answering this question of who makes decisions. But then people look at the rest of the system like, well, the rest of the system's broken. I'm like, it is. I can't fix it all. Like, but it is what it is. So I'm going to kind of bring this together. And Julia, I'm going to have you go first. If you've written a bunch of books, got the new book coming out, if people took one thing away from the book, just one, what would you say it should be?
Hey, listeners, like what you're hearing? Don't miss a thing. Sign up for the Childfree Wealth newsletter for weekly tips, tools, and podcast updates. Head to childfreewealth.com/newsletter to get on the list.
I would say lean on other people. Get some people, get a community, have people to turn to, especially people who've already been through caregiving or are in the process. They will understand it like nobody else. Those are the people that you ask questions from. You get the lay of the land from. Our book, is supposed to help with that too, answering whatever questions you have. Because most caregivers, especially when they're starting out, it's overwhelming. They don't know what to do. And they feel like maybe I can't handle talking to the doctors. I can't handle figuring out the finances or even paying mom's bills. I can't negotiate with my siblings. So our book is supposed to help people answer all those questions. But I would say the most important thing is to have some safety net, to have some people that you can lean on.
Barry, what's the one thing you would say?
I mean, just to underscore some of what Julie said, I mean, knowledge is power, and we really have been trying to empower people so that they can go into this not with a deer in the headlights kind of a look or a feeling of dread, but that they feel like this is doable. I mean, there's a learning curve. People get better at it, and they can do this. The other thing, though, I want to kind of leave your listeners with is this idea of, caregivers need to be kind to themselves, because oftentimes they're so self-critical. I mean, many of us are very self-critical anyway. So you get involved in caregiving, which is this really high stakes endeavor, and you can beat yourself up pretty good because you can't do this perfectly. But you have to accept that you're going to make mistakes, but all in all, you're going to do a good job, and the good enough is good enough, right? You don't need to be perfect. And that the guilt that people heap on themselves does not make them a better caregiver. It doesn't make them better prepared. It doesn't make them better skilled. They have to really be patient with themselves. And at the end of the day, what our hope is that they'll like reach back and pat themselves on the back and say, hey, this was hard as heck, but I'm glad I did it. And I think I did an okay job.
That's fair. So where can they find the book? Where can they connect with you?
So the book it will be available in all outlets, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble and bookshop.org. And in terms of finding us, we have a website that's www.caregiveranswerbook.com. Easy to remember. It has information about us and as well as other resources. And happy to people reach out and contact us. We always get back to them. Happy to provide encouragement and perhaps information to them.
Well, glad you're putting the topics out. We need to be talking about this more, and we need to be having a societal community discussion. Like, we need to do a lot of things, but I'm glad we're able to have the conversation. So thanks a lot for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jay.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.